The brazen bull. Also known as the Sicilian bull, it was designed in ancient Greece. A solid piece of brass was cast with a door on the side that could be opened and latched. The victim would be placed inside the bull, and a fire set underneath it until the metal became literally yellow as it was heated. The victim would then be slowly roasted to death, all while screaming in agonizing pain. The bull was purposely designed to amplify these screams and make them sound like the bellowing of a bull. Heretic's fork. This torture device consisted of a metal piece with two opposed bi-pronged forks attached to a belt or strap. One end of the device was pushed under the chin, the other to the sternum, and the strap was used to secure the victim's neck to the tool while the victim hung from the ceiling or was somehow suspended so that they could not sleep. If their heads dropped, the prongs would pierce their throat and chest. Lead sprinkler. Usually filled with molten lead, tar, boiling water or boiling oil, it was used to torture victims by dripping the contents onto their stomach or other body parts like the eyes. Using this device, the torturer would proceed to pour molten silver on the victim's eyes, which resulted in agonizing pain and eventual death. Iron Maiden. This torture device consisted of an iron cabinet with a hinged front and spy-covered interior, sufficient enough to enclose a human being. Once inside its conical frame, the victim would be unable to move due to the great number of steel spikes impaling them from every direction. The interrogator would scream questions at the victim while poking them with jagged edges. Rope torture. A rope is the easiest to use of all the torture devices since it is easy to find and can easily be fashioned to inflict a number of terrible retributions. For example, it could be used to tie the victim to a tree, leaving the victim exposed with no way of defending himself from animals or other humans. It could be used to hang victims at the gallows for entertainment purposes while ultimately inflicting death. And it could be fashioned to restrain the victim's limbs while attaching the other end to horses who would then be made to run, consequently severing the limbs. Guillotine. One of the most notorious forms of executions, the guillotine was made of a razor-sharp blade attached to a rope. The victim's head was placed in the middle of the frame as the blade dropped, severing the victim's head from the body. Since the decapitation was considered to be an instant and painless event, at least less painful than the other torture methods, it was often considered the most humane method of execution. The rack. Designed to dislocate every joint of the victim's body, it was believed to be the most painful form of medieval torture. This torture device was made out of a wooden frame with two ropes fixed to the bottom and the other two tied into the handle on top. Once the victim was bound and placed on top of the rack, the torturer would proceed to turn the handle. Eventually, the victim would be stretched till his limbs were dislocated. The torturers, however, would continue to turn the wheel until the limbs were completely torn off the victim's body. Cement shoes. The cement shoes were introduced by the American Mafia when they executed enemies, traitors and spies by placing their feet inside cinder blocks and then filling them up with wet cement. Once it dried, the victim would be thrown alive into a river or other deep body of water. Hanged, drawn, and quartered. During medieval times, the penalty for high treason in England was to be hanged, drawn and quartered in public, and though it was abolished in 1814, it has been responsible for the death of thousands of people. In this torture technique, the victim is dragged in a wooden frame called a hurdle to the place of execution. They would then be hanged by the neck for a short period of time until they are near death, hanged, followed by disembowelment and castration, where the entrails and genitalia are burned in front of the victim, drawn. The victim would then be divided into 4 separate parts and beheaded, quartered. Saw torture. In this method, the victim is hung upside down so that the blood will rush to their heads and keep them conscious during the long torture. The torturer would then saw through the victims' bodies until they were completely sawed in half. Most were cut up only in their abdomen to prolong their agony.